My heart is full of thanksgiving. Life has not been easy, but I thank God because at the end of it, there is light.
Wow, it was the most beautiful day.
I say, what? What's this? I jumped up.
You know, being amongst the whole country, being the only person chosen, I don't call it luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me first to recognize the guests of honor, and I believe it is the two groups of students.
The word is potential. There's so much potential there that we're going to transform into agents of change.
I am really humbled to be here.
Through this project, we believe that we can be able to build the next generation of agricultural professionals who will be able to transform agriculture in Africa.
TAGDEV, Transforming African Agricultural Universities to Meaningfully Contribute to Africa's Growth and Development, is a MasterCard Foundation funded project implemented by the Regional Universities Forum, RU Forum. It will award at least 110 undergraduate and 110 master's scholarships to academically deserving and disadvantaged scholars over the next 8 years.
Perhaps only less than 1% of the disadvantaged people have access to higher education in the continent. So it's beautiful that we are dealing with the biggest segment of our population are those who have not had opportunity.
The excitement for the first cohort of students at an in-depth orientation at Egerton University, one of 2 pilot universities along with Gulu University in Uganda, is palpable.
I'm so pleased. You see, I'm shaking because it's my first time of sitting together with a professor.
Thank you.
An extraordinary journey for both the students and a new model of transformative education has begun.
They come from really an environment where you think they will not move forward, but that background does not deter them.
We are 5 in a family, and I'm a total orphan. When I was growing up, education was a challenge, especially when I lost my mother.
Like mostly in our culture, those other people deep in the villages, like girls were not even allowed to go to school.
And it didn't take long, we entered into the war of the LRA, where you have to sleep in the bush. It rains on you and you get to school late.
The worst thing that I remember from that time is when my parents could not afford to give me books, just even books for going to class. And even when we could sleep hungry by that time. Yes.
Through all that, we managed.
There is nothing I can do about my past, but I have control over my future.
And I think sitting with these kids, they give us the confidence that Jewel Africa can correct its current position.
The unprecedented 3-week orientation was designed to prepare the students for the transformative journey to come. A unique suite of skills training included leadership, creativity, personal mastery, innovative and responsible communication, entrepreneurship, and identifying opportunities within agricultural value chains.
This week has been very challenging to me. It has opened my heart and my thinking capacity.
First of all, I have discovered myself.
I feel really empowered, and I think I can be an effective leader.
You've done a great job. Don't passion yourselves, okay? Pasha.
It's also an opportunity to review the way university does business.
Piloting a new way of teaching.
My dream is that this program fundamentally connects the universities to the communities, and the communities get a space within the university system.
I'll go down the ladder from the ivory tower.
Success for us will be to see that innovative education model scaled out to other RU Forum network universities.
These extraordinary students will return to their challenging environments and use their knowledge to spur rural transformation and instill an entrepreneurial creativity that will bolster food security and help elevate smallholder farmers into the global economy.
I want to be an entrepreneur. Every year we have thousands of graduates just doing nothing. So I want to be a job creator.
If I am from somewhere, I am the very best person who can transform that community. After finishing masters, I'll be the only lady with a master's degree in my area. So I want them to see that even when you are really highly educated, agriculture is still the most important thing.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session. And I would like to welcome you all to the session hosted by RU Forum, Annual General Meeting 2022. And this is called Transforming Higher Education in Africa, Moving from Dialogue to Action. I am so excited today as to be your host. My name is Nono Sekgoto. I am the sector lead for the AL for Agribusiness Network, which is a division of African Leadership Academy. As a farmer myself, I'm very excited about the discussions that we're about to hold in today's dialogue that has been organized by RU Forum. It is really encouraging to see that all the various sectors, especially in the higher education, are really taking agriculture to the forefront, especially thinking about entrepreneurship around how we develop our universities. Just to give you a brief overview around what we are going to be discussing today. Universities worldwide have traditionally performed three functions, as we may know, which is teaching, research, as well as outreach. But there's been so many stakeholders from across the continent who have elsewhere across the world who confirm that teaching and to the lesser extent the research that have been focused has been a focus to university efforts. The impact of universities outside their walls, though, is indeed to the society. They have created to serve, remain, and indeed the society they are supposed to be serving really remains at question. University outreach has remained undefined and unsupported, resulted in an unclear outcome and limitations used to university knowledge for community transformation. So the dialogue today, we're really going to try and seek to bring together stakeholders that are within the higher education landscape to share evidence of implementing transformation, which is so critically required in our universities across the continent and beyond. And we seek to bring a convergence of purpose, evidence, as well as practice to catalyze transformational actions amongst emerging as well as established universities. I am pleased today that the discussions will be very inclusive in a way that we will be having translations in simultaneously in Arabic, English, French, as well as Portuguese language. So I'm very excited today to also present our very first speaker to really open up for us with an opening remark from Professor Adipala Ekwamu, who is the Executive Secretary of RU Forum. Please, Professor. You're welcome.
Thank you. Let me start by welcoming Nono, whom I met in 2016 in Cape Town. Thank you very much, Nono. Great to see you again. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, it is indeed a great honor for me on behalf of my colleagues at the RU Forum Secretariat to welcome you to this webinar where we are talking about transforming higher education in Africa, moving from dialogue to action. In a special way, allow me to welcome Jim French from the Gichera Secretary General. I hope all is well with you. I don't know whether you're in Costa Rica or anywhere. Thank you very much. Our friend, Professor Mbofu, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Chinoy University of Technology, thank you very, very much for making time to join us. Mr. Sanese, the CEO of African Leadership University, thank you very, very much for joining us. And Mr. Jonathan, the Director of Program International Network for Advancing Science and Policy, we are greatly honored to have you here. Ladies and gentlemen, in your various different capacities and from wherever you are in part of this world, welcome. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you from the various locations of the world where you are joining. Proforum is a network of 157 universities, 157 universities in 4 African countries. We started as a network of 10 universities in 5 countries. And clearly, our growth has been phenomenal. The growth is remarkable in 2 ways. First, it is a resounding affirmation that the motivation and the values of the creation of this network forum remains arguably relevant. It was formed purposely as part of the effort of building a cadre of scientists and development practitioners with values and skills to drive change processes in the African continent, especially for agricultural transformation. It is a recognition that there's a need for greater collaboration and networking within Africa and with partners from within and outside Africa. Indeed, it is a revalidation of the Africa's Ubuntu philosophy. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now over 2 years since the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic that created a global paralysis on a learning, economy, and destroyed several livelihoods. We are still reeling from the COVID-19 pandemic impacts, and need to re-echo that COVID-19 is still with us and perhaps getting more domesticated within our environments. It is very important to know that while the global community fought back to contain the COVID-19 pandemic, some of the most useful solutions came from within the universities. The academia stepped up the game and provided solutions. Take, for example, COVID-19 vaccines, the case of AstraZeneca. Today, there are 41 approved vaccines, 222 candidate vaccines, 774 vaccine trials, and 79 countries with vaccine trials. Most of this work is happening with the universities playing a critical role. Importantly, technologies for online learning, e-commerce are being developed and are being improved. Some of these technologies are being used to reach out to farmers and support their efforts. However, we must not forget that Africa still remains with the old problems. 1, low agricultural productivity and food and nutritional insecurity, which has been worsened by the climate change and is affecting more than 51 million people throughout Africa, especially in the Horn of Africa and the Sahel being the most affected. We still have several skill challenges. We are graduating more job seekers in the continent, and this is rising despite the challenge that we need new skill sets and mindset to cope up with the changing environment. Third, unfortunately and very sadly, higher education is becoming an instrument for exclusion in which those who cannot afford to access universities or indeed the TVET colleges continue to join the large number of people who have dropped out of school. And this rapidly join agriculture, whose total factor productivity including labor, remains low, and some, in fact, become a source of insecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, poverty remains a wide concern. Last week, the FAO Regional Director for Africa indicated that the situation, food insecurity and nutrition and poverty is getting worse and worse across the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we also have declining values and a sense of responsibility to our society, and our environment is being eroded. Finally, we still have a large number of females who are excluded from education and the broader development landscape. These among some of the challenges that Africa in particular must address. So ladies and gentlemen, I do not seek to go to the Lamentations Bridge, but rather to point out that our people, our communities, our government, and indeed ourselves need us as universities and other learning institutions to take bold actions. The expectations are growing day and day, and people are becoming impatient with us, especially African universities. Consequently, universities need to reevaluate their mission and vision. We need to work towards enhancing the relevance of universities. Universities must actively engage with those they are serving. Second, universities must evolve new business models in the context of our development challenges. The ivory tower mentality was a simple colonial mind state engraved into our thinking for feeling prestigious as we served colonial interests as clerks and internal agents of subjugation. We have to break this trend through new education models for our competitiveness. We must quickly work and better respond to national and regional development priorities to enable our governments to deliver the required services to the people, to provide better countries and regions of Africa that is good for all of us. We need to continue to work together from time to time, leveraging on the advances from one region to another, sharing the best practices to reduce the investment costs and achieve rapid progress and impact. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining this webinar, and I pray that you are able to learn and contribute through various chats and questions that you will field. Most importantly, we look forward to hearing your own voices and ideas for moving forward. Collectively, we must push and work to achieve the vision of Agenda 2063. Ladies and gentlemen, you're most welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Such important words for us to really think through, especially now that we know that food security is so critical amongst our continent. And two things that I'm going to take forward from your discussion and hope we'll be able to unpack that along the way. Taking bold actions, I think it's very important for us, our new universities, as well as our old established university, to take bold actions about ensuring that we reach our food security that we need. And the other one is to also understand how do we share practices, best practices, and partner together, because all of us have a point to contribute, whether you're an individual or whether you actually are participating along the agricultural chain. So it'll be really exciting for us to hear from our speakers today who have got some interesting experiences to share. Our first speaker, who is Dr. James French, I would like to call you up on stage now so that you can present our next topic. Dr. French is a Secretary General of the Global Confederation of Higher Education Association for Agriculture and Life Sciences, and he serves as a professor researcher at the Center of Tropical Research and Higher Education, an academic vice president of Earth University, and the director of technical cooperation at the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation for Agriculture, where he directed technical cooperation amongst its 44 member countries. He has more than 35 years of international experience in research, education, and development. Dr. French serves on the board of director of the Cruza Foundation in Costa Rica and chairs its investment committees. He also serves on the board of directors of Founder Tropics Foundation and is also a member of the CATIE board of director. He holds a PhD in agriculture economics, specializing in production economics, with a specialization in statistics from the University of Missouri in Missouri in the United States. Dr. French today is going to focus on the topic called Transforming Higher Education Programs, Pillars and Models for Success. Dr. French, please, can you share your thoughts?
Dr. French has not yet logged in. Maybe we can skip to Jonathan.
Oh, okay. Dr. Jonathan, great. Welcome, Dr. Jonathan Harley. If you are already here, I would love to introduce you as well. Your topic will be on transforming learnings to develop critical reflections, thinking in learners. Just a brief on Dr. Jonathan. He's the Director of Programs at International Network for Advancing Science and Policy in the United Kingdom, and he's an experienced program manager. He has worked at the intersections of research, higher education, and international development, developing, managing, and evaluating capacity development initiatives in research and higher learning. He's also director of DFID-funded Transformation Employability for Social Change in East African Partnership. He has written and consulted on research capacity and higher education issues for bilateral donors and research agencies. He holds a degree in politics, anthropology, and archaeology from School of Oriental and African Studies in the University of London and Oxford in the United Kingdom. Doctor, please can you share your thoughts today and contribute to this discussion? Welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the introductions and for the invitation to join you today. It's a great privilege to join a group which is really setting the agenda for higher education and really driving change, and that's been really evident in some of your introductory remarks. Can I just check whether you wanted us to respond to the questions you shared earlier on, or will those come later?
So, Doctor, you can go ahead and speak around just the overall topic that we have introduced, and then we will speak around the questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So I wanted to tell a bit of a story about something called a partnership called Transforming Education for Social Change in East Africa, and a model we developed. And I wanted to start the story briefly, but start at the end with the punchline. And that's after several years of work as a partnership of East African universities. So Gulu University in Uganda, one of your core members, Uganda Martyrs University, Uganda, and the universities of Dodoma and Mazumbe in Tanzania, as well as colleagues from AFELT in Kenya, which is a faculty development organization, and Ashoka East Africa, and in partnership with us as INAF. a process of working with the universities, working as a partnership to really rethink teaching and learning and putting this idea of transformative learning at the heart. And after a few years of working very closely together, we did an internal evaluation to really find out, is what we're doing changing anything in teaching and learning practices? And I'll come on to that in a moment. And we found that 91% of academics said they were using gender responsive pedagogies. 80% of academics were using critical thinking techniques. 94% of senior managers in the institution said these changes were really important to their institutions, and 2/3 report that their institutions were very supportive of institutionalizing those changes. And by significant degrees, we saw an increase in the use of critical thinking and problem-solving techniques in teaching, of active learning strategies, of techniques to use complex problem-based and team-based learning, gender-responsive pedagogy. And at the end of it, we assessed a portfolio of individual lesson plans, and 1 in 3 of those was assessed as excellent, and 2/3 were assessed as good. Our academics, talking to them in surveys, in interviews, told us how they were really shifting their views on their role and what they could do for their students. And there's a few quotes here I'd like to share. One from a colleague in Tanzania saying, "Students are not empty vessels. When you give them the opportunity to interact, to share what they have, they will learn how to solve problems themselves." Another said, "When we're in class, let them think about what we're teaching, think on the scenarios, think on the problems facing society." Another lecturer said, "I started to analyze myself. Was I managing to create creative students who could express themselves, work in different kind of environments? I've got to find new ways of enabling students to participate now, to interact, to give their ideas." And another said, "I've loved my experience. I've really shifted my mental model about learning." So that's what the academics told us, the kind of lecturers on the front line of teaching. But we also wanted to know, how is this helping students? What was changing for the students? 87% of them had a positive experience of these new learning methods. And survey work we did and interviews and focus groups showed that there's a shift in students' learning practices. So particularly they were more able to use critical thinking and problem-solving approaches, applying facts and theories and methods in practice, examining their own views, changing what they thought about a concept, connecting ideas from their studies to understand their own experiences, clarifying their own personal values. So a whole range of things. And students likewise told us, it was a few more quotes here. "It allowed me to have an open mind. Life is not a straight arrow. Having a willing and open mind allows for flexibility." Another said, "It's helped me learn to appreciate the importance of working as a group or team." Another said, "I've learned to make the right decisions after weighing current situations. It's helped me to handle various situations in the community." And another said, "My thinking and way of perceiving things have totally changed from focusing on how to get employed to how to improve my community by starting something that solves their problems while I can also earn an income for myself." So the reason I started there, it's like I wanted to really focus on the change happening and the results we were seeing. Let me go back to the start of the story briefly. So this is a partnership of 4 East African universities. And what we're talking about here is what we've called a model from East Africa. We were really certain that what emerged had to be East African. It had to be rooted in East African universities, East African teaching and learning, and the realities of East African academics and their students, and the needs of their various stakeholders. So I want to now pay tribute to the 4 universities who've really taken this process and led this through some challenging territory. As I mentioned, that's Gulu University in Uganda, Uganda Martyrs University, Dodoma in Tanzania, Mazembe University in Tanzania too, and then 3 other partners who've helped to guide and support that process, ourselves, Ashoka East Africa, and AFELT based in Kenya. And we were trying to tackle some of the same problems that you've mentioned in your introductions, that employers and government and communities were seeing universities as these ivory towers, disconnected from reality, disconnected from the needs of universities. Students weren't developing critical thinking and problem solving and other 21st century skills they needed, that these relationships weren't working well. There was disappointment on both sides. Women students in particular were not finding university environments were enabling them to learn equally. And we thought the only way to solve this is to build new multi-sector partnerships that bring expertise from different places. And that informed our partnership. Then two other issues were important. We thought, academics here are the experts. They're the change makers. They're the ones who go into the classroom day after day. They've got to be not told what to do, told to change. They've got to be empowered to take their passion, their experience, and become the change makers. So our role is all about facilitating, guiding, and supporting that process. And we thought there was no time to waste because, as we sit and talk about changes to curriculum and teaching, students are going through their education, and some might already have graduated and yet not seeing any benefit from the change. So we said, what can we do to bring these changes into the classroom sooner? So we said, let's identify a series of degree programs. Let's identify a series of courses within those, and start to improve those courses. Start to align them for outcome-based learning, for teaching for these 21st century skills, centering the students.
Sorry, Doctor, could I ask you please just to speak a little louder? We've just got a bit of a comment from the chat that we can't hear you. So maybe get a bit closer to the mic if that's okay.
Okay, let me just check my computer. Okay. Let me know if you can't hear me. I will keep talking.
I can hear you now. I'll check with others if they can confirm. Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay. So we were responding to some very similar challenges and motivations, and we said let's take this at the course level, and from the course let's redesign courses so that if lecturers could one semester redesign their course, align that with what the university is trying to achieve, what the program is trying to achieve with these 21st century skills, think about new ways of facilitating learning in the next semester that can go into the classroom. They can see how students respond. They can adjust it, and all the while the experience for the students is improving, and progressively we can then take it through all the usual processes of quality assurance, knowing that it's working, knowing that it's achieving the right kind of changes. And in parallel, we said, this again can't be a kind of ivory tower exercise. It can't be universities, academics sitting around tables saying, what should we teach? We have to open those doors, knock down the walls, and invite the community, invite businesses, local community representatives, people from government into the conversation and say, what do you think is needed from our graduates? What do you think we should be teaching for? And to see them as partners in the process. And we did that through each university convened what they called a joint advisory group, a group to advise them, drawn from their particular stakeholders, to support them through the process, participate in identifying those skills, in thinking about what learning could do. And they started to talk about, well, let me come and give some guest lecturers. Let me come and work with your students. Let me offer some practical placements. So they were becoming more involved in the process too. And obviously, this is a challenging conversation. This is difficult territory. You're asking people to really change how they've been taught to teach and how they've been experienced learning themselves.
Yes.
But by providing this kind of environment and these kind of shared goals, we've really seen East African academics leading change in their institutions. Let me pause.
Yes, thank you. I think you've made some really critical points here, Jonathan. I mean, just hearing how you have gone out and actually invited various stakeholders to come in to give you a perception as to what you should be thinking about. So partnership obviously being a big one there. Just to give you a question that maybe you can answer here. how can you advise other universities to really plan and, such programs to make sure that the learning is effective? How do you advise others to do the same?
So we were really concerned that we didn't just have a small project in a few universities, in a few degree programs and say, that's our job done. We said through this process, we've got to be documenting this. We've got to be developing from this tools that others can use, tools that can enable it to, if it works from this small pilot, if it works and if our evaluations and our research on it as we go, our learning prove it works, it can be scaled. So we've made the effort to document it all in a series of toolkits, in a series of online courses, so that we can work with others, work with other institutions who want to embark on similar processes. And so we've documented that, and I'll put a link in the chat in something which we've called Transforming Higher Education. I think that link should work. And this is a Transforming Higher Education for Social Change, a model from East Africa. So we've published everything and really kind of step-by-step guides, case studies about what worked well and how to engage senior management, how to engage stakeholders, what didn't work so well, how we grappled with some of those challenges.
Great. Thank you very much, Jonathan. That's actually so helpful. The fact that even while you were still in your learning process, you were very intentional around whatever comes out of here needs to be shared. So you were already planning to document the information. That's really critical. And the fact that you've organized it in a way that you can already share with others, I think is even better. If anyone else in the audience has a few questions, please, you're welcome to share on the chat as well, so that we can share some of your thoughts, and it will be really interesting to hear some of your questions. In the meantime, I've got another one, and another thought about how have you been able to ensure an entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial learning gets instituted in the university? Is that something you guys are intentional about?
Yeah, and I think this is really where relationships with communities and business has mattered so much, because these are not traditional areas of expertise for universities. They have certainly faculty who do have experience and are teaching, in some cases, courses on entrepreneurship, business development. But generally this kind of came from actively seeking that expertise from outside the university and inviting those people in and forming those kind of relationships and partnerships. So helping students learn through practical assignments, using problem-solving tasks and small projects, taking them to work with particular people in the community. So I know Gulu took a group of students to work with some local farmers to tackle some of their just day-to-day problems and think about what they could bring from what they've been learning and studying. I think obviously one of the challenges is, it's not every student, every graduate can just become an entrepreneur. They need support. There needs to be an ecosystem. They need to draw on sometimes modest amounts of funding to get things started, to test ideas. So I think that's what we were able to do. We didn't have that full body of support. But I think important to all of this is that also there's a real alignment all the way through. There's kind of no point of making all these changes to content, curricula, and pedagogies if at the end of the day students still go to the exam at the end of the year and are asked to regurgitate knowledge and facts. So I think that's where it has to feel to them like it's taking them all the way through, and what they're learning is what they need to learn. It's going to help them graduate.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I think those were critical points. I think because the most important place to start is really in the thinking of how people can position themselves to think around entrepreneurship. And it sounds like your school, your university is really making an effort to do that. and taking context and, you know, bringing in different partners to share the on-ground experience, which you guys can really use to be able to share that with the students in your university. Thank you very much for the session. We're going to move on now to get back to Dr. James French, who I had introduced earlier. Thank you very much, Doctor. We hadn't seen you earlier, but you have been here the whole time. But I'm also very curious to hear some of your thoughts around transforming higher education programs, so your pillars and models for success. If anyone else obviously has thoughts and questions, please, you're welcome to share it in the chat. We will be taking your contributions as well. Doctor, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to, I hope, share my screen. Let me find out and get the right presentation.
Can you help the doctor to share his screen, please? Thank you.
He is allowed. You can go ahead to share.
Yeah. Yeah, I just needed to get the right, make sure I had the right presentation up. Yeah. Thank you very much to the organizers of this forum. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm sorry if I was a little late for the meeting. I saw the questions that I was sent last night. For me, it's at 6 o'clock in the morning here. And so I was spending a time making some adjustments to the presentation that I had. I'm going to talk about the pillars of the Transforming Higher Education program or project that we've been developing. There's a consortium of institutions involved in this project. American University of Beirut is the lead institution. GECHERA, which I'm the Secretary General of, and I'm also the director of this project. And Earth University and then the W.K. Kellogg Foundation is one of our key partners as well. These are the questions that were presented. And so I'm going to address some of these questions as part of my presentation, and hopefully there might be some more discussion at the end or questions. How have we been able to move from conceptualization to implementation? What has the journey been like? What have been the successes, and what have you learned not to do? And how may we move forward in the transformation effort? Just some background, of course, you know, the project came about because there's so many challenges that's confronting higher education, particularly in the agricultural sector, social challenges, challenges for the educational institutions. And I think in the introduction, you heard about a lot of these challenges itself, so I'm not going to go into detail. You can look at the presentation later. Agriculture today, for instance, is in a very complex system. It's no longer just general production of food and fiber that we've normally thought about agriculture in the past. It's very complex, but we're looking at biological systems, economic systems, and social systems in the interaction with agriculture. And that has an effect on the professionals that we are educating in the agricultural sector. We've recognized there's a greater need for an emphasis in creating or educating for essential soft skills and higher order critical thinking skills. You heard Jonathan refer to this, and I'm sure in the introduction it was also talked about. But also, of course, the technical skills, knowledge and skills which are required for agricultural professionals. So because of this, we reached the conclusion that we need to change, transform educational systems, reform curriculum and pedagogy, transform, and we heard about Jonathan's efforts in this. I think they're very interesting and important. Transforming educational models and institutional cultures even. Becoming an inclusive institution that integrates centers of learning for students, faculty, and the greater community as an integrated system of education, and promote innovations in teaching, learning, and the curriculum itself. So I'm going to give an overview of the project before we go into it. The overall goal of the project itself was to achieve transformative change, to enable universities to prepare university graduates as ethical leaders that serve society, who are creative and innovative problem solvers, contributing to improving the well-being of their communities and countries by positively affecting the environment. And this is, you heard from Jonathan, this is what really the basic goal that they have as well. Make sure that our graduates are more ethical leaders and agents of change. The project is based around 5 key pillars or elements of success that we talk about, and we want to create for each one of those systemic transformative learning systems within the university transformation. Ethical and value-based leadership, experiential learning as an immersion of students in the practical reality, university engagement with the communities, social entrepreneurship, training and business development, and problem solving and conflict resolution through dialogue. I'm not going to go into detail on each of those areas because I want to talk about more about the process, the implementation process itself. I can share other presentations that I've done that goes into the details. So what we are looking for is a systemic inclusion in the educational model of these 5 key elements. So how do we go about that? Well, first off, the project itself, it's a global project through the Gicheros Consortium, which RUFORUM is a member of, and we look to promote the university transformation model, which is part of my participation in this activity today. But also we're working specifically with universities in Mexico and Haiti, which were key areas for the Kellogg Foundation we're interested in that we work with in terms of actually implementing the university transformation process. There's 3 in Mexico, and which are all public institutions, and there's 1 in Haiti, which is a private institution. One of the first things that we did was develop a theory of change. How do we go about a change process? What is implied within the change process itself? And I don't want to go into real great detail. This is the conceptual map of the theory of change because it would take much more time than we have available for this presentation. But it's important. It considers what is the final goal? What are we trying to achieve? And I talked about the goal that we mentioned and what are the positive impacts that are associated with that. So there's a long-term outcome, but the project itself won't necessarily achieve the long-term. We look more towards the intermediate term. What are the principal expected outcomes that we're trying to achieve? Ethical leadership, sustainability, community engagement, social entrepreneurship, experiential learning, conflict resolution. To actually integrate within the educational model these 5 key areas which are known to enhance higher order thinking skills, enhance all of the different areas that we believe students, graduates need to be more capable and prepared for the employment sector and prepared for working in the communities and prepared for having an impact within society itself. And of course, there's the strategies that we have used, which is like change management, coaching, capacity development, knowledge and information sharing in general, and working with the universities themselves. One of the first things that we did with each of the universities is prepare a vision of the university of the future. How do they perceive their change? And what are the specific change objectives? We prepared a strategic change agenda, which has overarching goal. What are the strategic thrusts or specific objectives that they want to achieve in terms of the implementation of these 5 key areas of success, expected results and indicators and this turns out to be a very key part of the process, as you're going to see when I talk a little bit of some of the results that have come out up to now. So we have the change agenda, and there is an action plan developed for by each one of the universities that basically laid out the process that they expected to go through to reach the expected results. Now that process changed over time and specifically changed because of the pandemic, which affected all of our implementation as we were moving forward. In terms of the process itself, each institution followed its own path. There's no predetermined path that the institution has to follow because each leadership has their own way of doing things. Each university has their own culture. So they have to determine what's the best way to move forward. And we support that as part of the project itself. And each institution is led by a technical committee, which has leadership on the committee that makes the final decisions in terms of what and where they are moving to. And it's supported by a campus facilitating team, provided, and the project itself provides mentoring and guidance from myself, as well as from experienced specialists in each one of the elements of success. We provided training on different relevant topics, as well as continuous feedback and advice during the process itself. Project-wide, there were several different workshops, including an orientation workshop at the beginning where the commitment was achieved by the pilot universities and others. You see the photo here on the right. There's many Gichera representatives here, as well as the pilot universities. This was done at Earth University in 2019, February. And then from that point on, there's been a series of different workshops and training and site visits and analysis by specialists in each one of the different areas, which has continued. One of the things that we've tried to get each one of the universities to do is to develop a description of the systemic program, what they want that program to look like in terms of the specifics, the objectives, the processes, the actions, etc., in each one of those areas. And this is an example of the Instituto Tecnológico de Concal's process. Now, we also developed a series of training videos, which is available on our website for anybody to use in the community engagement, entrepreneurship, experiential learning, values, and ethical leadership. It's available for anyone to download. And there's future videos that have been planned. As a matter of fact, the values and ethical leadership videos have already been done, and the others are in experiential learning. Also, during the whole process, it's very important, we had an external evaluator, and there were reports provided by each one of the pilot universities where they had to sit down and reflect about what they were supposed to achieve, what they planned on achieving, and what they reached, and why they didn't reach certain goals, and why others were passed, et cetera, et cetera. So this was on a continuous basis. Every 6 months, these reports were put together, and an external evaluator reviewed everything and provided an overall report to myself and to the project steering committee or advisory board. They're in the process now of doing a final evaluation of the project itself. Last year, at the end of the year, we had a workshop where all of the pilot universities shared their experiences in terms of lessons learned. And I want to share those with you because I think they're very important, and it's part of the learning process, and addresses the questions that were provided. First off is that they need to increase application to your program. One of the results that they all found out very quickly is potential students from around their communities, from where their students came from, the applications increased very readily for the following year after they began to implement the program. And they have had higher retention rates in terms of the students, less dropouts of the students themselves. The change process should include the entire university. This is another conclusion that they came, because most of the universities, the change process was directed towards the College or Faculty of Agriculture. But very quickly, students from other areas of the university and other faculty members got really interested because they started seeing the motivation, they started seeing the activity, the excitement among the students, etc. So they wanted to become involved in the process. The students have became very highly motivated from the very beginning. The students from other areas or programs wanted to switch into the College of Agriculture because of the changes taking place. And they proved multidisciplinary integration across the faculty. This last point, leadership, is essential. You need to have commitment from the president of the university all down through the deans. They need to provide leadership in a lot of different ways, and values, ethical education, for instance, but supporting the process, possibly with resources or with just talking about it among the faculty and staff, etc. This is a key learning that came. Now, some of the highlights of the lessons learned that came from the workshop. Central focus of the university should be on the training of future professionals. One of the things that has happened in most large major universities is the focus has shifted towards research, and the training of future professionals has become secondary. Research shouldn't be disregarded, but universities were created originally for providing or for preparing our future leaders, our future professionals that society needs, for instance. And we need that to refocus on that as part of the process. Each institution has a vision of having a greater impact in their communities. That was something that came out very, very clearly. The universities themselves have this vision of being relevant and important for the communities themselves. And how you define community depends on each institution themselves. But universities need to transform themselves, although it is difficult. We shouldn't pretend that it's an easy process. It can be a very difficult process. It requires dedication and time of the people. And that's why you need leadership's commitment and support. And he who does not try does not change. This is a saying that came out in terms of this workshop. If you don't go for it, then you're never going to change anyway. It is impossible to have different results doing the same thing. Not everything will be perfect, but sometimes you have to adapt or restart and move forward. So this is another part of the learning. You don't necessarily move from point A to point Z. A lot of times you take side roads and then you have to move back, et cetera, and try new things. It has to be an innovative process. You have to try to learn, to be. We must leave our comfort zone was a very important message, to be able to strongly impact each of the elements or axes of success. It's very easy to be in our comfort zone, particularly faculty members that have been teaching the same course for centuries. We need to get out of those comfort zones and rethink how we do the educational process. The 5 elements of success are essential for education agents of change. This was a conclusion that everybody came to. They're all interrelated, the 5. It is more efficient and more effective to treat them comprehensively and not individually. Experiential learning is now the central didactic methodology of their new educational model. And in all 4 cases, this was adopted very clearly. There's still a lot of learning that needs to take place. There's a lot of training that needs to take place in terms of changing faculty's behavior and the faculty's way of doing things, the whole idea of reflection, the idea of gaining experience and practical experience, etc. It's a process, but every institution realized and has adopted it as the central core of their pedagogy.
Great. Sorry, Doctor, I'm going to have to just jump in there. There's something I would really like you to just touch on. I see there's been a lot of positive movement in your university and your fellow universities, which is quite exciting. Seeing the intentionality around where you started, which was about creating this theory of change, that will then lead you to then have a focus on measuring and making sure that you're able to evaluate as you go along. Very positive to me and as I'm listening. But 2 things that come to mind that I think if you could I would love you to touch on. What challenges did you get when you were trying to convince other universities to come on board? It did sound like once you could show a little bit of results, you could also see that momentum starting to build up. But at the very beginning, what was that? How challenging was it to get other universities to come on board? I think it would be great to touch on that.
Well, that's a very good question. And when we started the project, we had to identify the pilot universities that we were going to work with. So I developed a series of characteristics that we felt would be characteristics of a successful university. And one of those primary things was commitment and understanding that there was a need for a transformation process, that they could do things better in a different way. So in the process itself, I shared the project and what we expected to achieve. And the universities themselves, in a lot of cases, got very excited from the very beginning. The Quisqueya University in Haiti, for instance, immediately got very excited. The dean of the college and stuff, he had his own vision already about needing for a change process, etc. In a lot of cases, in some universities, it's not as much, they don't understand that they probably need to change or do things in a different way, but it's the not knowing how to do it. There's certain reluctance, or also there's certain other obstacles, for instance. And so it was just a matter of actually sitting down with them and talking about them and talking about the process and how we could work together, for instance, that we are able to get people on board.
Great, thank you very much. I think the thing that you also mentioned in your presentation was the importance of leadership. So I guess that's also a great way when you've got the buy-in of the leadership. It's easier to kind of get the whole institution involved as well. Another question is, you also shared a lot of positive movement around starting and building momentum and getting results already in such a short space of time. However, what are the two challenges that you say, you just had not anticipated, or that really you think you still need to work on? Could you maybe touch on one or two of those? It'd be good to hear.
Well, of course, the first thing that we didn't anticipate was the pandemic and how that would affect all of our plans in terms of how we were going to be working with the universities. And we had to switch into a virtual mode. But really, I think the two major challenges is creating is the training, the mentoring process, even of the leaders that need to go through the change process. A lot of times they get stuck and are not exactly sure how to reach the vision that they have, or if they're heading in the right direction, for instance. So it takes a lot of support, interaction. I have all of the leaders of the institutions on WhatsApp, and we talk on a regular basis. For instance, they call me for different reasons, etc. This, I think, the fact that they feel they have the support. And the other is the training process itself. It's an evolution. The change process at a university, and that's in the Theory of Change document that's developed, which is also on our website, talks about the theory of change process as an evolutionary process. So the time of the project is three years, and we got it extended because of the pandemic for 1.5 years, so 4.5. But still, the university didn't start the change process until a year in, and so they haven't completed a complete change cycle with all of their students. And so there's a need for continuing that process and supporting that process with training of faculty and with guidance. So I think those are the two challenges in terms of ensuring that we move forward. Is the second one. How do we move forward?
Great. Thank you very much, Doctor. I think you've really been able to give us some great ideas. And I did hear earlier you mentioned you have a website. It would be great if maybe you can share that also in the... I
lost sound with you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Hello, Doctor, can you hear me? Can anyone else hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, Doctor, it sounds like we've lost you, but we will come back to you. Thank you very much, Dr. French, for an amazing presentation and giving us thoughts around how we actually move forward. And now to switch on to our next speaker, if you could give me a second just to introduce our next speaker, who is Mr. Veda Sunase. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Close enough. Veda Sunase, yes.
Sunase, yes, that's it. Great. Just to give you a quick intro on Veda. He's the Chief Executive Officer at the African Leadership University, overseeing operations across both Mauritius and Rwandan campuses, while steering the institution's new 5-year strategy to become a distributed university across the world. He has helped develop and design leadership models central to the mandate of the African Leadership Group to develop 2 million African leaders by 2035. Veda helped us set up the African Leadership College in Mauritius before later serving on the founding dean of the African Leadership University in Rwanda. He's also a co-founder of NEA Delta, a leadership and education consulting firm, and he holds a BSc in arts major in political science with the focus on comparative politics and a minor in political economy from Princeton University in the United States. And he also has a BSc in science, specializing in mathematics, physics, and chemistry from the Royal College Port Louis in Mauritius. He was selected amongst the inaugural Obama leaders. Welcome, Vida. If you could please share your thoughts around developing institutional mechanism and processing for effective transformation in higher education. And then we will go through some of the questions that we have provided for you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon. And whatever time zone you're in, afternoon, morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. It is a pleasure to be here. And I presume one of the main reasons you've invited me is to really talk about how do you transform higher education institutions from within. I think just sort of to give you the audience a little bit of sort of insight and perspective on who we are. We are the African Leadership University. We are based in Rwanda. We also have a campus in Mauritius called the African Leadership College. The reason it's called the African Leadership College is because of the way regulation works in different countries. I will park that for now because I will probably come back to regulation later on as a key factor to consider as you think about transformation. I want to talk quickly about our reason for being. Some of you may be aware of the African Leadership Academy, which is based in Johannesburg, South Africa, which is a 2-year pre-university program that brings the best and the brightest from all over the continent of Africa into this amazing program with a big focus on leadership and entrepreneurship. So we're preparing them to be the next generation of African leaders. And I used to work at the academy, by the way, alongside the founder of the university, Mr. Fred Swaneker. And what we found is, we were preparing this youth and we were exporting that talent to the rest of the world. And it was not always easy to bring them back. And then we pause and ask ourselves, so why are we doing this? Or rather, why is our talent leaving the continent? And the short answer is that there are not a ton of really world-class higher ed institutions on the continent that people who would otherwise get opportunities to go to study in some of the best universities outside of Africa. You can totally understand why they would choose to do that because they don't have a ton of options. So one of the reasons that we came up with the African Leadership University was this idea of how do we figure out a world-class university for the continent, sort of a university for Africans by Africans kind of thing, right? The other motivation for setting up the African Leadership University was that we were acutely aware of just the dire need for higher ed options on the continent. We are, I presume this has been raised maybe even earlier, we are the youngest continent in the world with a population of 1.2 billion people with a median age of 19.7, which means that we have over 600 million people under the age of 19 in Africa. And yet, on the continent of Africa, only 8% of young people who finish high school go on to university. Let that sink in. Only 8% of those who finish high school, we're not even talking about what percentage end up finishing high school. So it was important for us to, as we started thinking about the solution to that big challenge, to think about, well, but what kind of higher ed do we need to be looking at? We looked at, models that have worked for hundreds of years in the West, and we quickly realized that those models are not replicable in an African context. If you do the math and you build a model and you say, you know what, let's take Harvard University as a prime example of, one of the best universities in the world, and you say, you know what, let's replicate that for the continent of Africa exactly as it is. You start already with, you need an operating budget of about $7 to $10 billion, which is impossible for us to find. We need to have all the PhDs. They're not enough on the continent to be able to support at the scale that we need to build these. We built a model in the early days where we were, essentially using this sort of this premise that if we were to move Africa from 8% to 18%, because this is something that India did in about 15 years, when it moved from 8% to 18%, arguably comparable population size, we said, and if we want to build Harvard-style universities, we realized that it would take us, in 15 years, we would need to be building at the rate of 200 Harvard-type universities on the continent for the next 15 years, every week. And obviously that is not feasible, that is not sustainable. Hence why it was imperative for us to think differently, to think about how do you bring innovation into education? How do you leverage tech and ed tech? How do you really revisit the teaching and learning, traditional teaching and learning approaches, and bring innovation that can then allow us to still not compromise on the quality of the learning, but be creative in the way we can deliver learning outcomes that are comparable to what you would get in any other institution, but still do it in a way that is scalable, that is affordable, more importantly, right? It still costs upwards of $60,000 to be able to attend one of those top universities out there in the world. And that is not a cost that the majority of middle class Africans are able to afford, right? So that context is what led us to build institutions. So even when we started in 2014, we were already pretty innovative, already pretty disruptive. But even then, we landed in a highly regulated environment that is not necessarily always conducive for innovation. I will not mention which regulatory framework, but I will never forget the day when the regulators came and measured the size of my office, because there is a requirement for the size of the office of the dean as a condition to be able to get accreditation to get your program. So then you start asking yourself, do we have the right frameworks to enable us to, just forget innovate, but to just like run effective higher ed programs on the continent? So, all of this to say that while we were coming in already as innovators, we face a lot of hurdles, and then we have had to transform again because something interesting happened, which is called a pandemic. But I'm sure you will ask me some questions later on that will help me unpack that even further. So that's the context.
Great. Thank you so much, Veda. Just very interesting how just simple things you never think about. The reality is now, as you said, with the pandemic, we don't even need classrooms, so to speak. But yet, the offices needed to be, measured to kind of see if there is impact or if you guys are going to be relevant. But I think if you can just touch on something that the institution is really passionate about, which is leadership development, it being so central and core to ALU. Why is this critical to your university or in the work that you do as an institution?
Yeah, for sure. I think it is no secret to us on the continent that we have had failed leadership for a very, very long time across the entire continent. And we believe it is imperative that we prepare this next generation of youth, right, to really become the leaders that this continent deserves. And leadership, we can't assume that it happens organically. We can't assume that people grow on to become, again, this is a much longer conversation, but you can't assume that people organically will become ethical, people will organically become entrepreneurial, people will organically become problem solvers. I do believe that you need to be intentional in their upbringing, in their preparation, in their education to prepare them for that. So for us, while obviously I painted a very important context of higher ed generally in Africa and why innovation was required, but we didn't want to just create these higher learning institutions to provide, a university option, a higher education option. We felt it was important to provide an education model that serves a purpose. And the purpose that our model serves is to prepare and to train ethical, entrepreneurial leaders for the continent of Africa. What does that mean for us? It's not just some pretty tagline, pretty vision statement that is on our website. Everything that we do, every program that is designed at ALU ultimately serves the purpose of developing ethical entrepreneurial leaders, which means that we are very deliberate and very intentional. From the very first year in our model, it is mandatory, whether you're doing engineering, whether you're doing social sciences, whether you're doing entrepreneurship, it is mandatory for everyone to take what we call the foundation core. It's a year where you focus on building some very important hard and soft skills with a big focus on leadership competencies, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, empathy, etc. All right, that's one reason. The second reason is that anybody who's paying attention to the future of education, to the future of work, will tell you that the research is showing that employers are pointing the finger of blame towards higher ed and saying, you are not preparing the youth for the real world. People are coming out of university not having the right competencies, not having the right skills, not having the right mindsets. They're not able to work collaboratively. They are not critical thinkers. They are not problem solvers. They are not systems builders. They don't even think they can't even practice systems thinking. There's a laundry list that any of us is aware of. You can find it. Some call it the 21st century skills, different names for it. But at the end of the day, when you look at it at its core, all of us are saying that you've got to prepare people, right, who are able to thrive in this new world. And we are entering a world where there is a lot of unpredictability. And honestly, the best thing that you can do is to prepare somebody for this unpredictable world, which begs the question then, how do you prepare somebody for an unpredictable world? How do you prepare a youth today to step into a world where research is showing that 60% of people who are entering primary education today, the jobs that they're going to have, 15, 20 years from now when they enter the world of work, don't exist, right? How do you prepare a generation for a world where the work they're going to be doing don't exist, right? And I think the best thing you can do is to prepare them, to teach them to learn how to learn, right? Because if you learn how to learn, then you can reinvent yourself at any stage in your life. And I think we are already seeing it today with a big focus on autodidactism, with a big focus on, with almost infinite access to information. Anybody can essentially pick up any skill, any day, any time, right? You've got short courses, you've got all sorts of credentialing that exists now that is actually even disrupting higher ed, right? Very soon, probably in the next 15, 20 years, higher ed is going to have to face some, maybe even earlier, this is up for debate, but we'll have to face a very important existential question, right? What is the future of higher ed? Will it continue to exist the way it exists today? Why? Again, because there is such a rapid need for people to skill, to upskill, to reskill, and yet we are still looking at regulatory frameworks where it can take you anywhere between 9 months to 12 months to 15 months to get one program approved. By the time the program is approved, it is probably already irrelevant, right? So for us, why is leadership important? Is because you need people who are able to think differently, who are able to disrupt, who are able to be problem solvers, who are endowed with the right values, the right mindsets, and the right skills to transform society.
Right. No, thank you very much. Very extensive and very well thought of, because we do know that leadership is an issue on our continent, and to be able to get everything else moving, we've got to get there. But as you're saying, you've got to start from the ground, and it's a journey that you guys have to go through. I think the one question I would also like to share with you is around the regulation and the framework. It's interesting that you keep mentioning that. And because we as institutions exist within these set frameworks, are you doing any work around maybe engaging the right stakeholders who'll be able to kind of either in future relax these or kind of get them to focus on how to support institutions such as yourself who are forward looking and really thinking of the future focus? Could you share, especially with the entrepreneurship element in it? We've been mentioning that today.
Yeah, my former boss, who you may know, Chris Bradford, had this principle that he shared that I carry with me. He said, to win the game that you want to play, you need to play the game that you are stuck in, right? To win the game that you want to play, you have to play the game that you're stuck in. And again, you could debate that because sometimes it's like, no, let's change the game, right? This kind of disruption doesn't always happen easily, and very often you can actually alienate a lot of key stakeholders that you need to really think of as potential partners. And I think regulation is probably one of the spaces where you need to play the game that you're stuck in, as frustrating as it may be sometimes. But if you are able to demonstrate that your vision, that your model is able to achieve outcomes that are as good, if not better, than the old, the world will have to pay attention, including the regulators. And the truth is, to their credit, you go to any sort of conference these days that is focusing on quality assurance, that is focusing on accreditation regulation, everybody's talking the right talk. Everybody's talking about we need to shift, we need to change. Education is transforming globally. Some regulatory frameworks have moved faster, right? I recently had a meeting with NECI, the New England Commission for Higher Education. They accredit and regulate the likes of Harvard, the likes of MIT. And it was really an eye-opening conversation. And, and they were very openly sharing how, they are also realizing and observing that there's so much disruption in higher ed that unless they as regulators also, become disruptive, also adapt their frameworks, they will become obsolete. So this is a regulator telling you, I might become obsolete if I don't pay attention to the kind of change and innovation happening in this space. And I think, across the globe, including on the continent, right? Everybody is becoming increasingly aware that more has to be done to develop skills, to develop competencies, to prepare people for the future of work, to encourage workplace learning, to encourage experiential learning, to really get people real world experience before they even graduate from university. But I think, there's more of this dialogue that needs to happen. I think there's more of this partnership that needs to happen. I think too often regulators really see their role as a police. Yes, it is part of their job description. They need to police, they need to regulate, but it doesn't have to be only that. You don't have to be, a police that can't be a partner, right? You can also be a partner. You can also be ally. And we have been very lucky in Rwanda, for instance, where the regulators have decided to be partners with us as we are piloting an entirely new model that is truly very, very distinctive and disruptive from the traditional, to the extent that the framework doesn't really quite exist to situate an institution or a model like ours. And yet, they said, let's come together. We're going to test this out together. We're going to pilot this together, and we can help each other in terms of how do you even craft that framework. But these kinds of sort of, support from the top level, from the highest level of leadership in a country is not easy to find across the continent, right? I know of many peers, including Ashesi University, where they can tell you stories for days around the challenges of working with regulators. But this is the game we're stuck in. So we have to patiently play it and demonstrate that there are different ways to play the game that lead to better outcomes even.
Great, thanks. I guess as you're saying, it's just a journey, but it's important to be in the mind frame of where you are. The context matters, and obviously building partnerships in the space to be able to eventually make the change is something that makes sense. So my last question to you is what have you found that really works in your context that probably does not work elsewhere?
Yeah. Listen, I think something that helps us is, we position ourselves since day one of our existence as we are here to innovate, we're here to disrupt, not just for the sake of disruption. It is truly constraint-driven innovation, right? I just painted a picture earlier that tells us that, guys, if we want to do it the old traditional way, we're going to leave hundreds of millions of young people behind. We have to do it differently. If we don't prepare the youth of this continent to be able to become job creators and job seekers, we will have failed them. right? We are looking at probably one of the greatest opportunities on this continent, or a very tricky situation, right? If we have, 500 million people who don't have the right skills, the right competencies, the right education, right? Who are entering the workforce, that could be very dangerous, right? So which is why, for us, making sure that we are very upfront about the need for innovation and try to be a voice in it has definitely helped. We've also made some bold, I suppose, choices, right? In our model, we since day one, we made it very clear that when you come to be a faculty at our institution, when you are endowed with the job to teach, we want you to see yourself, and this is not just sort of some tagline, some cute, philosophy. It is, we live by it, that you're coming in to be a facilitator, a curator of learning, not the sole custodian of knowledge, right? And that is something that is built and ingrained in our learning model, right? That our role as educators is to facilitate learning, that the student has to be at the center of their learning journey. They are in the driver's seat, and the best we can do is to scaffold that learning, right? So making these choices, putting a focus on experiential learning, really working with partners in the real world to create opportunities for our students to go get experience as early as their first year. These are all things that we've done deliberately to be able to show, again, the outcomes, right? The results that we get from employers, the feedback has always been outstanding. Our graduates, they earn on average 4 times the mean salary that a young African makes, right? And I think that's purely because they have the skills and they're able to be recruited and hired by employers who are able to compensate them better for these competencies that they have.
Great. Thank you very much, Viraj. Just so extensive as you kept going, and I can see all the passion as well. I would love to just add the other speakers. We've still got some time for discussion now, and it would be really great to kind of cross-learn about some of the things that we've heard from other speakers and share that out. But before that, I've got some questions in the chat, and I'd like to just focus on that. I see one from Crispin Murungweni, and it's directed at Dr. James French. It says, my question to you, yes, universities can produce change agents, trained personnel that can help to address real problems within our society. How do you propose to adequately finance this change process to happen on a win-win basis, i.e. having a society happy with changes, coming up with change agents and making change agents want to continue working with society to achieve positive change? What program can we put in place to motivate more graduates to become change agents? I hope you got that, Doctor. So it'll be lovely to hear your thoughts on that. Oh dear, I can't hear you, Doctor. Can anybody else hear the Doctor?
No, sadly.
No, still nothing. Maybe you're going to have to try remove the...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, okay, great. Sorry. Thank you, Chris, for the interesting question. I answered a little bit in the chat box, but I think it would take a long bit of discussion to talk about how we go about trying to finance the change process. First off, I think universities can move into a change process without a lot of resources, and they can develop resources over time. But the major commitment is time of the faculty, time of the leadership within the university itself to just sit and discuss, talk with your stakeholder groups, talk about with your businesses, your community, whether your graduates, where they're going, and what is needed in terms of the change process itself and how you can move forward. I like Veda's discussion about innovating. I mean, you have to rethink the university and the way the university operates, and it requires a big commitment by the university itself. slowly you can develop other resources for certain types of changes in curriculum or changes in structure, et cetera, and other things like that, and look for the appropriate means of doing so. But as Vida and Jonathan have both clearly stated, there's a need. Clearly, the universities are not graduating the types of graduates that are required and needed by society, by business, by employers. They need to be thinking as entrepreneurs and thinking. And by moving into an experiential learning mode, by moving out and working out in reality with the communities, et cetera, it changes completely from the first year, as Vida says, from the very, very beginning. And it changes the student themselves, which is one of the main, presently, they're passive learners in a traditional educational system, and we want the students to be the leaders of their learning process. They have to be the center of the learning process, and they have to be excited about learning and pursue what it is that gets them excited and what they're going to do when they leave. And as Vida mentioned, also, they have to learn to learn. They have to learn to be leaders. They have to learn to create and work externally. And even take leadership within the businesses that they create or that they work for or wherever else.
Great, thanks, Dr. French. I think I'm really liking those connections that we're making from the discussions we've had. Universities from across the world in very different contexts. African Leadership University being brand new and really thinking of new ways of doing things. And yet you're able to say that's definitely, the way to go. And it's great to hear that if other institutions can really start incorporating this new way of thinking and focusing on entrepreneurship. I'd like to bring you in as well now, Jonathan, if you could also give us your thoughts around, as you can hear, a lot of the leadership discussion in this discussion at the moment, leadership and focusing on getting our young people to also become leaders in their space. How are you guys in your space looking at that?
I think one of the really important things which the 4 universities did in different ways was brought their students into the process, because this was disruptive for them as well. This was asking them to learn, interact in class completely differently. So they had to be part of the change process too. It couldn't just be done to students. It wasn't, okay, this is now you're going to learn differently. Here's what you have to do, when you've had your whole education has been molding you in a certain way to participate, to learn, to respect certain hierarchies in the classroom, where the academic is at the front and knows everything, and you're just there to sort of absorb as much as you can, write as much down, and hope you can regurgitate as much of it at the end of the year. That had to change, but that was discomforting. That was a real difficulty for many students who were saying to some of our colleagues, that's not what I came to university for. That's not what I'm paying for. That's not what I'm expecting here from my time. Don't make me do your work. You're the teacher. You do the teaching. I'll do the notes. But making them part of the process, centering them and saying, look, this is about you, your learning, about what you want to become, what you want to use your experience in this university for 3 or 4 years to let you do when you graduate, and to build those skills and those dispositions and competencies and values for later life. So I think centering the students, inviting them into the process, respecting them, as young people, as people with ideas, with passion, with talent, with creativity, all of these things.
This is great to see that there is, a shared belief in the work that you're doing around centering education to get the young people to be leaders and actually curators of what it is that they're there to learn. There's another comment in the section in the chat, which I'd just like to highlight. It says, a student being at the center of learning and being in the driver's seat is the right model for HEI. True faculty are no longer the sole custodian of knowledge. They are facilitators of the learning process, and students should be in charge. And you're saying thanks, Vida, for that. So obviously resonating with our audience. I've got another question, and that was from Dennis Dennis Sibugwawa. And then we've got Dr. Florence, who says, what do you think needs to be done by the employers and communities out there to ensure that change takes place? So he hasn't really, she hasn't specified to who. Does anyone would like to take that question?
I can take a stab, and I'm sure we all have perspectives on this, so I'll get started. First thing is, first of all, and I said this in a couple of conferences I attended recently, we need to stop having these discussions in silos. Higher education needs to stop having these conversations in silos. Employment needs to stop having conversations in silos. We need to get together and actually work together, right? Because otherwise you get stuck in this cycle of finger pointing. Now, on the employment side, I think some things that let's not forget that, again, just like in higher ed, very often the analysis and the realization that things need to shift usually happens at the high level. Then you trickle a couple of layers below, you go to the regulators, the ones who are doing the paperwork, you're already lost in translation. And I think in employment also that happens very often. What we'll see is, I have these great conversations with other CEOs who are like, oh my God, love your model, great, send me 4 interns. It trickles 2 layers down, it goes to HR. HR is like, I don't know what to do with interns. I don't have an internship program, right? So next thing you know, you've got your students who are supposed to be there for workplace learning. Now they're like sitting there idling away. So in the workplace as well, from the topmost down, I think there needs to be a shift in a few things. How do you even hire? What do you look for, right? It's becoming increasingly clear that a lot of the measures that we cared about before are not real predictors of how well somebody is going to perform in your workplace. Many big companies, especially in tech today, are not paying attention anymore to your GPA, for instance, in the American system, right? Because they're looking for competence, they're looking for actual skills, right? So a mindset shift needs to happen in the world of work as well, as they assess. Sometimes I look at the newspaper, we're still advertising jobs in my country, in Mauritius, where they are asking for their O-level grades. O-level, this is like senior level leadership, where you need people who need to demonstrate how well they've led. We're asking for the O-level grade. You ask the question, but why? Why do you care about what they did in their O-level? I'm just curious to know, what is this a proxy for, right? And I don't think they are relevant. And I think a lot of these markers need to change and to evolve as well. Maybe my co-panelists can add to that.
Yeah, thanks very much. Go ahead, Doctor.
Yeah, and following up with what Vida saying, the business community, the community leadership, for instance, they can have discussions with the leadership at the universities. They should be partners within the university process. First off, we need to change the leadership of the universities in terms of their thinking. They need to pull them in together and have discussions with stakeholders and bring them into the classroom. For instance, they should be part of the classroom itself in a very close, interactive relationship. But they have the power of, they're the ones that are either contracting their graduates or not contracting their graduates. And so they need to make known to university leadership that changes need to take place, that they have different expectations in terms of the graduates themselves. And of course, institutions like RUForum can play a very key role, for instance, in bringing these groups together, for instance, and doing surveys and studies, for instance, that as academicians, it helps academic leadership, for instance, understanding that there is systematic change taking place that they need to address.
Great, thank you. And actually, Jonathan, you actually did mention this earlier in your talk. You guys are doing that very well as well, bringing on various stakeholders to the party when you're creating your program, especially in the transformational aspect of it.
Yeah, I think, absolutely echoes what my colleagues have said here, that it's about bringing those stakeholders into partnerships with the institution and not holding them at bay until you need a placement, an internship, and then saying, now we need your help, but actually all the way through so that they understand. It's about understanding each other, where they're coming from. I think there's been lots of disappointment on both sides of these relationships. Universities saying, look, they don't understand what we're we're there to do. That's not our job. And communities and business are saying they're not being useful. But by involving them in the process, I think, and creating something like the joint advisory groups, which I mentioned, which became a new part of the governance structure for universities. So they've got their very established formal mechanisms, councils and senates and various boards and committees, and those take time to kind of shift those. But what the joint advisory groups created was a new forum that the universities could invite these people in, selecting them carefully from to bring different expertise in different roles, and then had a mechanism to keep working with them. And what we heard from some of our colleagues is they were able to say to the members of these groups, look, can you lead on this? Can you take the lead on this particular task? So they were not just providing feedback or responding to consultations. They were actually taking a co-leadership role and were invested then in the success of that university. And I think there's a great example from Gulu, because it's really rooted itself in its immediate community, and universities have to know their different communities. They can't all get the same stakeholders. They can't all get the big businesses. They have to think about who their stakeholders are.
Yeah. I think I'm also hearing another answer. Earlier on, somebody kind of brought up a thought about finance. How do you finance such structures? And I think once you start getting big business and corporates to be part of this, I think that's where kind of some of the money can come from. If stakeholders really see this beneficial and they understand the long outcomes, I know that this is something that sounds like they could definitely invest in. And I think that's probably another way that we can think about how to finance such platforms. I've got another comment here from Eddington Gororo, which Vida also supports. It says, I believe that for students to be center of learning and experiential learning, they require two things. So facilities and infrastructure where students can learn in real life context. And the other one would be greater participation in industry and business in university training programs. For the first point, universities may really have to change the face of their physical and virtual learning spaces. The second requires university industry partnerships. So we're really all coming to that nexus where we understand that partnerships must include everyone in this space. I have a question here from Tendekai Henry. Hello, Vida. Thanks again for the presentation. What can we do for those who have already graduated? It is surely fair to say that the need to change has happened almost suddenly within respect to timeframes for changing curricula under the current regulatory framework. Universities are playing catch up. So yeah, some of us who've already, are we lost now that we've got our degrees?
I sure hope, and again, I welcome the perspectives of the other colleagues here. I do hope that Tendekai asking this question believes that learning is a lifelong process. And if you believe and subscribe to lifelong learning, you can always reinvent yourself, right? Make no mistake that the skills and the competencies and the degree that you have right now has endowed you with a fair amount of skills that are transferable even if you were to move industries. But yeah, maybe there are certain skills and competencies that you care more about now. Maybe you've discovered a new passion now. Maybe you've discovered that there are other areas where you could make more money, because that also matters, and you want to reinvent yourself. There are many ways today that you could do that, right? You can always, the different types of education model as well, right? Now there's all sorts of hybrid models, distance learning, hybrid in-person and distance as well. You have all sorts of short courses that you can find, some of which are purely virtual, some of which are also, hybrid versions. So there's a lot out there. That's one of the good news, is that there's no shortage of options and opportunities to really reskill, to upskill. And as you said, thankfully, in some contexts, corporates are investing significantly in internally developing and growing talent. And if those structures exist within your institution where you are working today, see how you can sometimes tap into that, right? Maybe you may not have the resources to go and reskill or upskill, but maybe your company might be willing to sponsor you while you commit to offering a few more months or years of service. So no, it's not all lost, right? Learning can always happen, and there are alternatives to reskill and upskill at this stage.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you, Vida. Especially, you know, I keep telling everyone I'm in agriculture, and I think I'd like to sway a little bit of the discussion to moving towards that, being you know, this platform with Reforum and focus on agriculture. And the work we do with young people is really trying to also shift minds and perceptions around this industry that is just so critical to the survival of, you know, the human race as we know it. But yet, so universities have a very critical and important role to play in this space. And so for me, the question I'd really like to put out to all of you here is, how are we developing young people to really understand the importance of the sector itself, to be able to, for them to feel that they know that they can make impact when they go out there. A lot of times it's not about, it's not necessarily always about the specific skills. It's around mindset. And also, as you keep mentioning, how do you reinvent yourself around opportunities that you find in your space? So if anyone can touch on those, and just to verify, yeah, that, you know, agriculture is still on top of our our discussion this afternoon. We'll start with Dr. French.
I'm sorry, Nona. Let's let Veda begin, or Jonathan.
Okay, no problem. Jonathan, would you like to start? Do you have any points around the importance of agriculture in this work that you guys are doing around, transforming young people's minds, etc.?
I mean, I think it's absolutely important, and I can't speak from expertise in agriculture, so I'll defer to my colleagues there. But I mean, certainly, I think the one university which directly addressed agriculture was Gulu. One of the degree programs that it put through the process was the agricultural faculty, and absolutely about engaging students and seeing agriculture as, you know, as something with a future, something which required new ideas, new approaches to solving problems, ability to assess and weigh evidence, and, you know, new forms of data, new forms of knowledge, and learning how to work with farmers and communities to do that as well. That kind of humility.
Yeah, if I can follow up. Also, I have to caveat this by saying that I am not an expert in agriculture, and our university, while not having a focus on agriculture, has a track where our students are able to. But I also wanted to comment that there are other higher learning institutions that focus exclusively on this. There's one where we actually have sent a number of our students, called Earth University in Costa Rica, where, you know, they have really good programs that focus primarily on you know, helping people to become to be equipped, right, to be in agriculture in this sort of 21st century, right? And I'm sure it's not like it was before. There's a lot of you know, maybe a comparative field that I'm a little bit more familiar with is conservation, and a lot of our students follow the conservation track as well. And when I've discovered the amount of sort of tech that is now involved in this space, I realized that actually you can be a computer scientist, you can be a software engineer, and have a passion for conservation, and still have an incredible career in that space where you can merge these different interests. So what we try to do is we try to get people to precisely triangulate their various interests and find ways to marry these different areas and sectors and skill set as well, so they are able to effect change. But remember, our focus is ultimately to develop leaders who can be systems shifters, change makers. And I think we all know this, that nowadays things are more multidisciplinary than they are unidisciplinary, right? So I think while yes, people need to build the requisite expertise, I think they need to look broadly as well. Tony Wagner, who is an educator who I respect and has this book called Creating Innovators, talks about how the youth today who wants to be innovators, they need to become a jack of all trades and a master of something, right? It kind of goes against this idea of being a jack of all trades. Before we used to front them, it's like, oh, you're a jack of all trades, but what if you build mastery in? It's like, yeah, actually, you need to be a jack of all trades today in this 21st century, but you need to build mastery. So I encourage people who are in this space, yeah, you maybe build mastery in agriculture, but you've got to build other competencies as well, because all of these things matter if you want to have an impact in the broader system that we operate in, right? And last quick comment on that one is, our learning philosophy is this idea called missions, not majors. When you come to ALU or ALC, you don't declare a major, you declare a mission. My mission is, this is the change I want to see in the world. This is the impact I want to see in the world. And then you curate your entire learning to fit that mission. And we do have students coming in whose mission is to have impact in agriculture. And you see, it shifts them from thinking purely of, oh, I'm learning agriculture, to no, you are trying to effect a specific kind of change in this industry. Let me pause there.
Yes. I'd like to comment on that, especially doing a lot of the work around that, is that it's about the young people or people who are interested to make that impact, to understand what value they will bring to the sector. And that really is very internal focused in order to understand what competencies you need to be able to do that, what skills you already have, and how you sharpen them as you go along. So absolutely. Thanks, Vida. I like that. And Dr. James, if you can, yes.
Yes. This allowed me, to get a comprehensive viewpoint of the issue from the perspective of my colleagues. But I'm from the agricultural sector. I was the vice president for academics in the creation of Earth University, and that allows me to, I think, address this in a very comprehensive viewpoint. Agriculture is essentially has to be a part of this. Agricultural fields, the universities, and the training that takes place in agriculture today in the traditional universities is leaving our graduates not prepared to make an impact, to make a contribution. And agriculture is one of the most important employers or areas of work, for instance, in Africa, if we want to talk about Africa specifically. I mean, in the rural areas, in terms of the possibility of creating employment, creating better development among the rural communities themselves. And it addresses the need of 100% of the population. Everybody eats and everybody has demands, and everybody wants to have different types of foods, for instance, more ecologically based foods, more healthy foods, more other things. And as I addressed at the very beginning of my presentation, the agricultural sector has become one of the most complex sectors because of its interrelationship with the environment, interrelationship with the climate, interrelationship with society, etc. So we need to have that systematic and systemic thinking of our graduates. They have to be prepared to think as in all areas and understanding of all areas, not just the technical area of agriculture. And if you're a farmer today, farming is a business. It's no longer just an activity where you're producing food for your own farm family, for instance. So you need to think beyond for instance, just the technical aspects and also that relationship between technical aspects and the environment. You have to have an understanding of those interactions, for instance. And in agriculture today, students are taking courses all across the university, not just in the technical area, for instance.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. James. And actually to the three panelists, what an insightful session. We received plenty of comments from our audience, really just being thankful and feeling that this was a very insightful, very realistic, and very practical session where people have taken learnings that they will probably use And thank you very much. I myself have also learned a lot, and this is always great for me as a person in the sector and somebody working with young people across the continent who are in universities right now, building their careers and really finding a way to build their competencies as they go. So thank you very much, everyone. And we would like to take this session to the next speaker. Thank you very much. Great.
Thank you.
And I would like to introduce our very last speaker, who has been making some comments throughout the session. And this is Professor Ivan Mpofu, who is the Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs and Administration at Chinhoyi University of Technology in Zimbabwe, where he has championed the mainstreaming of Doctrine Education 5.0 that comprises innovation and industrialization in addition to the three traditional functions of the university, namely teaching, research, and research. And he's learning the e-learning model, leading the e-learning mode. Prior to that, he was a director of research and graduate studies and professional chair of animal production and technology at the same university. Professor Mpofu serves as the chairperson of the Department of Animal Science in the University of Zimbabwe, where he started his career. He was the founding dean in the first school of the veterinary medicine in Rwanda, and he also championed the creation of the first faculty of veterinary medicine in Namibia through the Department of Animal Science. He holds a PhD in animal science, specializing in mineral nutrition from the University of Pretoria in South Africa, my country. Welcome, Professor Mpofu. You may have the floor, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts around issues and challenges of fostering institutional transformation. You may go ahead.
Thank you very much, Nono. Indeed, I would like to begin by thanking the RUFORUM for organizing this webinar and all the co-organizers from various universities. I also want to thank the panelists we had in the first session. Very interesting, scintillating, mind-changing presentations. So I'm going to make a presentation on issues and challenges in fostering institutional transformation, but giving some evidence in form of examples from my university and probably all other universities in Zimbabwe, because of a certain doctrine that we work with, which I'm going to mention as I go along. So basically, my presentation is, I'll just give you a small introduction and then quickly look at the issues and challenges. I will not separate to say these are the issues, these are the challenges. I'll just look at the issues and the challenges as a mixed bag, because a lot of these issues are also challenges, and many challenges are the real principal issues that are important. So I'll talk about advocacy, changing the mindset, implementation, enabling working environment, funding and financing. But the honorable three panelists have made my life very easy, because they've touched on a lot of these things from their contextual experiences. So I will not go into much detail from a principal point of view, other than just giving evidence as I go along. Now, to begin with, I think it is very important now that we must embrace a migration initiative from simple knowledge accretion that has characterized our universities for decades, to skills-based university education. And in Zimbabwe, we've migrated from Education 3.0 to Education 5.0. So traditionally, Education 3.0, as Nona said the other time, is basically dealing with teaching, research, and outreach. But in this country, in Zimbabwe, we now have a doctrine that we call Doctrine Education 5.0, where in addition to these traditional 3 pillars or functions of a university, we've added innovation and industrialization. We also take note and are also very happy to see that in many African countries, they have a similar philosophy. Some countries talk of this as a problem-based university education. Some talk of result-based education. Some talk of skills-based education. It's one and the same thing expressed differently. And if you look at the various pedestal, is basically heritage-based, which means the continent is has realized that development is based on heritage, resources, God-given natural resources, and our education system must hinge on these natural endowments, from minerals, the climate itself, vegetation, aquatic resources, the human resources themselves, and many, many other issues. Now, the issues and the challenges. First, let me look at information dissemination and packaging. This has come out very, very clearly from the other panelists. If you want to transform a society, it is very, very important to package information and then have a dissemination strategy that is very functional, effective, and efficient. So in Zimbabwe, we've had Doctrine Education 5.0. This has been a killer punch in terms of packaging the new mission, vision, in as far as where we want higher education to go. After realizing that there was some deficit in terms of skills, there was a skills audit which was done in the country, and it was clear that there are certain areas that we were not paying attention to, and therefore to address that, we had to make sure that we migrate from Education 3.0 to Doctrine Education 5.0. So we actually have a national document called Doctrine Education 5.0. Anyone can just Google Doctrine Education 5.0 Zimbabwe and you will see it. And all universities, including my university, we have taken on board this doctrine because the way it was packaged and the way it was disseminated and the strategies used is something that captured our attention. And we even realized that we now have to do things differently. It's no longer a want to do, but a must do. That is integrating the 3 traditional pillars with 2 pillars, innovation and industrialization. And the main aim, I think one of the panelists talked about the importance of the final result. Today, we would want our graduates to be functional. We want to surpass the previous model, which created employees. We also want to create, yes, we want to improve the employability, but it will be better if we can create employers. Employers who can create solutions for current societal, socio-economic and technological challenges. We would want universities to champion the production of goods and services for economic growth. And this requires innovation and creativity in terms of advocacy. And our starting point has been this national doctrine, which is informed by research, this national skills audit, and quite a number of other initiatives. The second thing is changing the mindset. Well, you cannot really separate it from the previous one, but it's a standalone. It's something that is worth to be put as a standalone issue. You can imagine decades and decades of an education system based on teaching, research, and outreach, and people excelling. Yes, we've excelled in all these. Basically creating, content vessels, people who have got a lot of knowledge, but that knowledge, we started seeing that there is a problem because I think as one of the documents from RUFORUM mentioned, that there has been a massification of higher education. A lot of people have been educated. We now have a lot of graduates, but now we start seeing that a lot of these graduates, they are failing to get employment. And then this is something that has actually cajoled us here in Zimbabwe and in other African countries to say, oh, maybe there's something wrong. And now we've realized that we really need to go beyond teaching, research, and outreach, and include or integrate innovation and industrialization based on this higher education university, basing it on the heritage. So, and also it has allowed us to speak with the same voice in as far as looking at the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, especially goal number 17, if I'm not mistaken, and also Agenda 2063. There has been a discussion that how can we make agriculture attractive, especially to the youth. And I could see the passion about that from our facilitator, Nono. But if we read the document, the Africa Union Agenda 2063, there are points which are raised there to say, well, I'll put it in my own way now and say, our Agenda 2063 want us to make agriculture more sexy, which means I'm just using that to say more appealing to the youth. And one of the issues that is mentioned is that we need to improve technological development, technological usage in agriculture, so that the youth do not see agriculture as something that is associated with labor. We need very nice and functional machines. We had the Harare Agricultural Show this past week. When we found out that there was some machinery which looked very, very fantastic, with very good features, but very, very functional. And you could see some young people hovering around, trying to find out whether is this a toy. But then the presenter would inform them that no, this is actually a machine that can do this job and that. And once we have we mechanize agriculture and make sure that our implements also look appealing. Even a tractor, it must look appealing so that a young person might feel like I would like to drive that tractor. I would like to operate that complicated machine that that tractor is drawing. So, you know, the mindset needs to be to be changed from various ways within universities, in the societies, as we interact, even in shows, etc., etc. So, and then there is also an issue that we have done in our university, and also that has been done in other universities in Zimbabwe, where Doctrine Education 5.0 put more emphasis on practicals. So we are actually in a transformative process where we want to make sure that students spend 60% of their time doing practical work and 40% doing the theory, basically reversing the equation. But when they do the practicals, they must do those practicals which are useful, which will make them gain skills. As a result, as I shall mention later, we have come up with some infrastructure or a suitable environment to make sure that this happens. Now, the other issue is the implementation. Yes, we now have a lot of graduates who are very educated and who do not have employment. But this is an opportunity, because if you want to implement anything, you would need a critical mass of resources. Then you can we can start off by selecting the resources that are useful. And here, the massification that has happened has produced human resources which is available, and we are dealing with people who are educated. They can easily be changed. The mantra that has come through of change management from the other presenters is very, very important. We have an opportunity to effect change because we've got the people who are educated, people who can easily you know, respond to the advocacy, people who can easily be malleable to having their mindsets being changed, and they are available, and we can actually use that as an opportunity. So, and then if we can come up with various governance structures, I think many universities, if in our university, we now have committees that run a graduate school. We have committees that run innovation hubs. We have committees that run industrial parks, et cetera, et cetera. So these are very, very important you know, governance and structural issues. Of course, with government support, I'll mention some of the vital things that our government has done, which most of our governments in Africa are trying to do. Now, the enabling working environment, in the environment in its many forms, from physical, the operators, the staffing complement their competencies and what have you, the reward systems. These are very, very important. In this country, at our university and many universities in Zimbabwe, the government has deliberately introduced and supported and funded innovation hubs and industrial parks. And to make agriculture sexy, as I've said, a lot of industrial setups have been done from an agricultural point of view, such that we actually have a number of agro-industrial parks, where if you go there, you will find out that there's a lot of technology that is there. There's a lot of value addition of agricultural commodities. There is complicated manufacturing systems. Like at our university, we have a state-of-the-art feed production systems. We also have cement processing. We have bottling of water, drinks. Professor Dipala at that time talked about useful, I think he called it useful solutions. We have you know, a lot of products that have been produced by our university and other universities in Zimbabwe to you know, back up government efforts to control COVID-19. So the working environment is very, very important, because you can imagine from Education 3.0, we had classrooms and teaching laboratories. Now, in addition to that, we've got innovation hubs, which have integrated incubation processes. We have the industrial parks, and we've taken a deliberate move that we want most of the practicals to be happening in these infrastructural provisions. And this is something that has allowed us now to make sure that our students spend more time in practical-based situations, so that they can learn in a problem-solving environment. We've also taken a deliberate action to encourage our staff to attach themselves to industries when they go for contact. Normally, you know, in universities, when lecturers go for contact, they go to another university, it's okay. But we are now encouraging our staff, and well, very soon we'll actually make it a point that they have to go into industry and catch up. I think something has been mentioned that we need to do a lot of catch up because of the availability of information on the internet. Our students they are actually ahead of us in terms of many things, because they can watch YouTube videos and what have you. They can easily challenge a lecturer on practical terms. So this is why we are working on encouraging our staff to also partner with industry. And this has actually improved the relations between us, universities, and the industry.
Hi, Doctor. Sorry, I'd like to cut you in there to direct some of the discussions that we've also kind of planned for. And I think, thank you so much for the presentation. It seems that being in a traditional university, the mindset already in the leadership seems like it's changing. And I think that's a great point, especially in the discussions we've been having, is that if there is no change in the leadership, and the way you are presenting this to us clearly shows that the mindset of the leaders is also taking shape. Can I ask you a little bit more question just to direct the conversation? To think around how exactly, what programs have you put in place exactly to see this mind change in your students exactly? So do you have a specific program that speaks around entrepreneurship examples? It would be really great to hear your work around that, because entrepreneurship seems to be the one that is a game changer in our universities right now.
Okay. So the one thing is that we have encouraged faculty interaction, especially in research, in projects. If say there is a project in agriculture, we want to see an engineer there, because you cannot do agriculture without engineering. We want to see a business expert there. We want to see an accountant. We want to see people from art and design. Because if you're going to produce anything, it must look nice and appealing, and so on and so on. We want people from who deals with the indigenous knowledge. We want people from hospitality. If you are going to take any product to the hospitality industry, it must be acceptable. We want to, you know, people from wildlife, everyone must come in. That's one thing, especially from the point of view of managing this whole thing. But from a curriculum point of view, all our students in the first year, they take a module on entrepreneurial skills. They also take a module on communication, ICT applications, and whatever. That is compulsory. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's really making sure that when they arrive, you're also orientating them to the entrepreneurship and of course being able to participate in the ITC. As we know, the 4IR is right up against us right now. So I think the other thing that I'm taking from you is collaborations. Collaboration being a very big part in the students' learning to understand how the different skills really interact with each other to get into entrepreneurship. And another question I have is, as a Vice Chancellor of a very established university, how are you confronting the notions that traditional universities do not change?
Today I'm just an acting Vice Chancellor. I'm actually the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and I'm actually making this presentation on behalf of my boss, Professor Zimbi. We have heard this mantra that publish or perish. Now we are saying innovate, industrialize, or perish. And we have a policy that when we take our first year students during the orientation week, they visit the Innovation Hub, the industrial parks, and so on and so on. And everyone within the university, especially through the managers, maybe the top 4 layers of management, they are aware that our students, when they get in already during the first week before they go into class, they actually see the landscape that they are going to participate in as they learn. So if you are in management, you are a lecturer, a professor, and you don't conform, you perish.
I see. And another question that I'd like to just touch on a point that you mentioned, and you spoke about this quite a lot, is how you are, there's a lot of investment that's going from government into innovation hubs as well as industrial hubs. How I'd like to touch on some of the work that has come out of that. How has the university benefited from those initiatives? Okay, so if you have an innovation hub, it comes complete, the buildings, the equipment, and also the salary grants for the key personnel, the content experts, super experts from a technical point of view. So you have a situation where the support is comprehensive and complete, and then you transform the whole learning ecosystem from an infrastructure or environmental point of view. The students come in, they are from high school and they are in an environment that is mind-boggling, and they are young, tech-savvy. They quickly see that, our country is going in this direction, and they resonate very well with what they even read in newspapers, what they hear our leaders, our ministers speak at various fora. That way things move. So the support has been phenomenal, actually. Great, I'm glad to hear that. Being able to share resources as well that the university can benefit from. That's a great platform. I've got one more question here, just coming from the audience. Uma Apollo says to Professor Mpofu, I appreciate the fact that you allow students to work in multidisciplinary team. Allowing students to work together at an early stage at the university is a nice idea. I would like to know whether there are unique ideas and lessons you have learned from allowing students to work together. Are there any unique conflicts and ideas that you have come across? It would be great to hear on that.
Well, I can immediately say so far we do not have any conflicts. But everything is very, very positive. Remember, these are students who come from high school where they learn history together. science together, mathematics together, and what have you. And what has been happening is that when they come to university, we start putting them into silos. You are in political science, you are in a business, and they start competing themselves, even in the halls of residence and what have you, in corridors and what have you. So we now want to correct that. We are correcting it. We have to work with a blended kind of a situation where the students, when they work together with their professors, also coming from different sectors of the university, they will know that we are working for a common purpose. And it's one of the smartest ways of even inculcating patriotism within them, because they see that the government, the ministers, they're talking about this, and the team spirit, they see it practically, they participate in it, in a problem-solving environment, and it works very well.
Oh, great. I'm excited even myself hearing that. In the work that I do, as well as being a network lead, the one thing that we really try to push is to make sure that young people are connected to each other, especially to be aware of each other's strength and how they can collaborate. So I'm really, really also enjoying that session there. Thank you very much, Dr. Mpofu. I think that is our time for today. We appreciate the presentation that you have delivered and sharing some of our questions. Thank you very much to our audience as well, who have been very engaging. We've had some amazing comments, thanking the audience, thanking the presenters. And I myself, being a commercial farmer from South Africa, have learned a lot, and being someone who works in the industry with young people, I've been very appreciative of the information that I've shared. And just to give a closing off, if you could please close off the sharing, I would appreciate it, so that we can just share some learnings that we've had in the session today.
Okay, yeah, let me try to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just to take stock of what we've learned today, I've made so many notes, I've learned so much, and I would just like to touch base again on some of the highlights that we've heard and learned today. The importance of universities taking bold action around transformation, ensuring that partnerships are at the center of the work that we do in bringing on the communities, universities, whether it's regulators, whether it's young people, to the forefront to make sure that we're all learning and moving in the same direction. Another point that I picked up was in the work that we're doing to develop new ways of learning. You heard how the University of African Leadership University has come up with ways of finding ways to put the young person in the center and getting them to be the curator of their education. And then hearing from Dr. James French around the importance of sharing with community universities and how we are encouraging each other around changing and transforming the landscape together. Really from the beginning of putting together theories of change, putting together evaluations as you go along, and really presenting those positive outcomes as they come along, and don't wait at the end. And I think that's how you kind of bring everybody along as you start showing those improvements coming out. And then also hearing from Dr. Jonathan, the importance of bringing on various stakeholders who really can share in the vision that we as universities would like to take bold actions into. And closing, Dr. Mpofu giving us a view of how important to make sure that our young people are engaged with each other, learning, collaborating along the way as the education is transforming. And we are very thankful to RUForum for putting up this platform for us this afternoon. I've, as I said, learned a lot, and we thank our presenters today, as well as our the Secretary General of RUForum, who opened for us earlier today. Thank you very much for this wonderful session, and thanks to the audience. Goodbye and have a good time wherever you are.